Hey, what's up guys? I'm back with another Sonic video, this time bringing in my retrospective on the Sonic Genesis Trilogy series. Now before I go on to talk about on how the specific Sonic game here is terrible and how it's no way connected or faithful to this trilogy series, I think it would be appropriate to discuss and share my retrospective on Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles beforehand. So with all that being said, let's get started. So for starters, if you are a Sonic fan and you haven't played any of these, you need to play them ASAP. Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, and Knuckles can easily be played through either emulation, through the Genesis Collection on console, or through the Sonic Mega Collection on past consoles. Heck, it's even open for download on mobile and Steam, so there's really no excuse not to play these if you're a Sonic fan. Second, these games are what made Sonic have its start in the gaming industry in the first place. Without these games, Sonic probably would not be where he is right now, or been big as he was in the 90s, with the spin-offs that spawned from these games. And lastly, they are just fun to play. If you like side-scroller games with fast-paced action, then the Sonic Genesis Trilogy shouldn't disappoint. Alright, so enough praising this series, let's talk about each game in this collection. So this video won't be too long, I'll be going over my thoughts and only be discussing the key things that stood out to me the most in each Sonic game. Then I'll do a little comparison at the end and then wrap it up. I should also note that this video is nothing more than a reflection of my opinion and experiences with a few pieces of facts here and there. Some of you may agree or disagree, I'm just expressing myself as a fan of the series. So with all that out the way, let's just talk about Sonic 1. Sonic 1 was the first ever Sonic game released way back in 1991. It was also the game that introduced the most overused video game stage ever, Green Hill Zone. Whenever people talk about Sonic, Green Hill Zone always pop into people's minds. But honestly, who can blame them? I mean, it's pretty iconic, and it's probably the best zone in the entire game itself. Just the flow and overall pacing is perfect. But it's a shame I can't really say the same for the rest of the game for the slower paced zones like Marvel and Spring Guard Zone, or just plain unfair ones like Labyrinth Zone, but you know, I digress. Sonic 1, despite it being the first Sonic game and the most iconic, it is probably the worst one of the entire trilogy series simply because of its difficulty. You see, before Sega started emphasizing more of the speed asset with Sonic 1 was mostly focused on platforming and obstacle dodging, so this is more on the slow and steady side of things. But that's not to say that Sonic 1 is a bad game despite it being outclassed by its sequels. The music is memorable, the zones are iconic, and the controls are simple. However, in this game, Sonic doesn't have his iconic spin dash move, which gives him a good speed boost, so you only have the ability to either jump or roll in certain situations. But I should mention that the re-releases of Sonic 1 fixed this issue by adding the spin dash and even a difficulty option like in Sonic Jam. But my original experience with Sonic 1 was on the OG Sega Genesis version without these options, so yeah. Anyway, Sonic 1 is based off trial and error, but after a few playthroughs, the game should get a little bit easier and a bit more fun to breeze through. Its sequel Sonic 2 fixes the majority of this issue, so let's just move on to that game. Sonic 2 was surprisingly released a year later, with it releasing in 1992. Now I may be slightly biased with this one because Sonic 2 was not only my first Sonic game, but it's my first video game in general as a kid growing up in the 90s with the Sega Genesis. But I think I can say with confidence that Sonic 2 significantly improved on everything I found wrong with Sonic 1. The first thing that was improved was the overall engine. Sonic now moves faster and he feels less stiff when platforming. Aside from that, this was the canon Sonic game that introduced the spin dash ability in the series. By simply holding down and pressing the button, Sonic can charge up and gain a good speed boost. This overall makes Sonic 2 feel faster paced than Sonic 1. The zones are also bigger than Sonic 1. I mean, Sonic 1 had 3 acts per zone whereas Sonic 2 has 2 acts, but the difference is that the zones are twice as big if you compare the two. Lastly, this was the first Sonic game to introduce Tails in the series. Even though he doesn't have the ability to fly by the player, he is still playable in 2-player mode or in single player if you go to options. Tails can also be controlled by AI if you play as Sonic and Tails. Even though he can be useful in boss fights and killing enemies, he is absolutely useless in special stages as he will mess you up. But, you know, aside from that, Sonic 2 has twice the amount of stages, twice the amount of content, and more abilities than Sonic 1. Not a bad Sonic game within the Trilogy series, and I highly recommend to play this over the first one, just so you can experience the massive difference between the two games. But that's not to say that Sonic 1 is absolutely terrible, but I do feel like Sonic 2 is sometimes overshadowed by Sonic 1 for simply being the first of the series. But hey, those are my overall thoughts with Sonic 2. Now let's move on to Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Sonic 3 and Knuckles was released in 1994, about 2 years after Sonic 2. Sonic 3 and Knuckles improved even more than Sonic 1 and 2 combined. Now before I go on, let me just say that the original release was split into two separate carts, Sonic 3 and then Sonic and Knuckles. This was because the game was so large to put into one cart that it had to split into two carts. So Sonic 3 ended up being released in February 1984, and then Sonic and Knuckles came out later in that same year in October. Sega fixes this issue by giving Sonic and Knuckles the ability to lock onto other Sonic games like Sonic 3, which unlocks the full intended game of Sonic 3. As a bonus, Sonic and Knuckles can also lock onto Sonic 2, which unlocked Knuckles in Sonic 2. So that was pretty cool. But for the sake of this review and focus, I will be only covering Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Even though I experienced the games separately, this is because the original intent of Sonic 3 was supposed to be Sonic 3 and Knuckles. So I treat Sonic 3 and Knuckles as its own single full game. So with that being said, Sonic 3 and Knuckles really lives up its expectations. In this game, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles is playable. And as obvious, this was the first canon Sonic game to introduce Knuckles. Sonic has additional abilities like Instant Shield and Elemental power-ups, and Tails can also fly and be controlled by the player. Knuckles can glide and so on. Now, I can go on and on over the basics because I'm sure the majority of you have played Sonic 3 and Knuckles, considering this was the most popular one within the whole trilogy. So let me just sum up my thoughts on this real quick. So in a nutshell, the main thing I can say that Sonic 3 and Knuckles improve on is overall level dynamics. You see, the zones are even bigger than Sonic 2's, and there are many iconic ones that I've enjoyed, like Ice Cap Zone, Carnival Night, Mushroom Hill, and Hidden Palace Zone. You know, these are examples of diverse and pretty cool levels. You know, the way that the zones are presented and how it keeps the whole overall gameplay fast-paced and action going, you know, it just makes the game really fun to play. And combine this with the enhanced character abilities, you got yourself a pretty solid Sonic game. And the music is pretty awesome as well. I love the music in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. I think it's the best compared to Sonic 1 and 2. But hey, that's just my opinion. But aside from that, I think the biggest thing that really made Sonic 3 and Knuckles stand out are the super and hyper form abilities. So yeah, I guess while we're on the subject, I think it'd be appropriate to talk about the special stages in the Trilogy collection. Special stages are the bonus stages that you complete for a Chaos Emerald. Collect all Chaos Emeralds and you get the good ending when you beat the game. In Sonic 1, there are 6 Chaos Emeralds that you can collect to get the good ending. But Sonic 2 changes things a bit and added 7th Chaos Emerald with the ability to turn to Super Sonic, which makes you invincible, with the only downside being consumed by rings. But it was pretty OP to earn though. This then carried on to Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but if you lock on Sonic 3 with Sonic and Knuckles, both 7 Chaos Emeralds combined from both games will give Super Chaos Emeralds, which you then can collect to turn into either Hyper Sonic or Hyper Knuckles or Super Tails. These forms are insanely broken, but it's a nice reward for beating these special stages, because let me tell you, the special stages in this game just suck. Yeah, I may get some flack for saying this, but I find all Sonic special stages to be insanely tedious and unfair at times. Sonic 1's and Sonic 2's special stages are just cruel at times, which is why I think a lot more people like Sonic 3 and Knuckles more. Not because it's just the only one to have a save feature, which Sonic 1 and 2 doesn't have, but the special stages are a lot more easier and it feels a bit more fair. So sure, while they may be frustrating to complete, at least you get a OP super and hyper form if you manage to beat it. But hey, that's just my opinion and thoughts. Anyway, that's gonna wrap it up for this video. I know I glazed over a lot of things and left some things out within this trilogy collection, but this is just a retrospective. I'm just simply giving my overall thoughts and impressions out of this video. Because this wasn't meant to be an in-depth review. It's more of a reflection in the past to share the basics that made these Sonic games great in the first place. So if you haven't played these, especially if you're a new generation Sonic fan, you should definitely pick these up. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll be talking about this specific Sonic game in my next Sonic video and how it feels in every shape and form. So yeah, look out for that, and peace.